There, Professor Doğan Soyaslan saved our lives. he was the he was a consultant. This is my idea, in my personal opinion, because I've been in the middle of the coordination. He was a consultant to the Ministry of Justice, Cemil Çiçek, and he was called the professor of professor. He was very famous and very respected. He was very much against our demands. By the way, he's very secular and so on. So, I mean, really, this issue is not at all an issue of religion or not, and etc. So he was very much against us and to all the demands. So one of the issues was, which was accepted by the subcommittee, but this guy, this professor didn't accept it. It was the issue of the article which allowed for cancellation of penalty in case a rapist accepts to marry the girl he has raped. That is, somebody rapes a girl, but then he says, okay, I accept to marry the girl. I mean, like as if giving her something. And then his sentence would be cancelled. So what happens in Turkey on the ground with this law is, of course, such a law, such an article is never applied to rich people, right? I mean, like well-educated or of higher. It's always applied to women or girls who have no money, no education, etc. Okay? So therefore, the article was actually not known by the public. And as we brought this article, as the issue came to that, there was a public uproar. Okay, oh God, people said, we didn't even know that there's such an article. It's terrible. How can you force a woman to marry her rapist? I mean, it's terrible. There was really a lot of public support for that and emotions on this. But Professor Soyaslan was against it, so they called him to a television channel, because every night there was a debate on the law. And then he was invited to a program on the television. They asked him why he was against it. He said, because this is against our custom. It's against the reality of our country. I was tearing my hair. I mean, like girls are being forced to marry, and the guy is saying it's against the realities of the country. Yes, the reality was terrible, actually, for girls. Anyway, so then the journalist did something very good, and then he said, well, I've heard that you've got 2 daughters. So let's say your daughter was raped. Would you like your daughter to marry the guy who raped her? He said, of course not. And then I said, okay, then how come you're supporting a law if you don't want it? If you say, of course I don't want it for my daughter, then why are you supporting the law? And then he said, well, my daughter is well educated and we've got money. I'm thinking of the poor girls. That was a huge mistake, of course, you can imagine. People went to uproar because it was a very clear case. A professor of law is discriminating between higher classes and lower SES. Instead of saying, by the way, just the opposite, we should support women who have he was saying the opposite, So this created a public uproar and a media uproar. In my opinion, in my feeling also of the public, that was the moment where everybody in the media, in the public started saying, so just accept all the demands of women. I mean, they didn't care anymore. Said, no matter what they say, just accept it. They told to the government, okay? We want you to have all the demands. They called it women's demands. Just accept women's demands and all of it. That created a huge pressure. Campaigns for the Turkish Civil Code and the Penal Code and the reform, it was a huge reform, both of them were huge reforms, have been very unique in Turkey. The campaign was very unique in the sense of the number of organizations it has brought together. And despite this vast majority, huge number of organizations, it was very well coordinated, and we managed to keep one voice. Of course, in the penal code, the number we had, I think, 40 organizations. It was less than the civil code, as can be expected, but still to organize 40 organizations, and we organized a huge march. Our friends in front of the parliament the day the law was passing. All of this was incredible work. So it was very unique how we had one voice, and it was very well coordinated. Probably the most difficult was not to lose the energy, and the hope. because you have to sustain that energy. Imagine, I mean, like, if I also take the which I started in 1996, the campaign for the protection orders. So it has been 8 years of non-stop campaigning, and it's very difficult work, campaigning. So these were very unique things, and I think at the end, even some members of the government, the Justice and Development Party, JDP government, told us, well, it's amazing, the women you have women, I mean, we were in a position, but at the end they said, we respect it, you've done an amazing job, you really stood on the job, you didn't give up, and etc. Just to give you one example, at the time I warned the president because we were working on the law, we were aware of various other problems in the draft law, okay? So one of the issues was the issues related to media, which are now on the table in Turkey. So there were several problematic things about the media, but it was very clear that it must be the media representatives working on those issues. So I warned the president of the Turkish Press Association. I said, sir, by the way, for your information, there are really very problematic issues related to the media. I think you should really work on them. You must find a copy of the law the committee is preparing. And he said, thank you very much for your attention. We know what we are doing. He didn't even listen to me. The same guy, the same person, much later, as our law passed, etc., we met each other years after at an international conference, and at the time the media was becoming aware that there were several problems. He said, you know, Pinar Hanım, you had told me. I wish I had listened to you at the time. We weren't aware as you. The work women done by women weren't done by many other sectors. Yeah, this was very unique. Things are really very difficult for women and the women's movement in Turkey now. I'm really very sad about this. There was, after this years of working and campaigning, I really had hoped that although all these reforms were accepted, despite the resistance of the government, I was really hoping that the reforms themselves and the legal changes would change, would change the society, or would change the politicians, the decision makers, and so on. Things have not gone that way. I mean, I see, at least for the time being, I mean, like the last reform was in 2004, so it's been 7 years now. I think a good time, more or less, to look back. For example, we're seeing a lot of problems with the implementations of the laws. I think partly it's also because of the resistance. The government was very resistant at the very beginning, so I think that resistance is coming to fore now. That's partly that. But secondly, I think conservatism has increased incredibly in Turkey in general. Like conservatism is very much increased. I think Turkish society was always a conservative society, more or less. But there's no question that the conservative policies and politics of the present government, which has been the Justice and Development Party, which has been in government since 2002, is also affecting and shaping the society in a very conservative manner. So, this, in general, what I see is, when people ask me what is the biggest problem in Turkey, why is this happening? You had these wonderful laws, but now the situation is not looking really good. By the way, the fact that the situation is not very good is documented by evidence, because both the UNDP gender empowerment measure, the World Bank measure on the gender gap, etc. All these measures, international, very serious measures, are showing that since 2006, this is very interesting. Imagine, the last reform was in 2004, but in fact, since 2006, it is showing that the women's empowerment, the gender gap is increasing, and the empowerment of women is decreasing. I hope that I will be able to see in my lifetime, before I die, that Turkey joins EU. But I lived in many European countries for many years. I lived in Austria, Vienna, I lived in Berlin, Germany, I lived in Switzerland. So I know also Europe from inside. So, my point is not like, I don't see Europe as a glorified place to be joined to, like many others probably. But my real issue is we really need it for regional stability and peace, but also for global stability and peace. I mean, that has been the major reason why I think it's very important, both for Europe and for Turkey. I have a lifelong residence permit in Germany, which I'm so thankful to, I must say, because you can't imagine. Sometimes I'm getting an invitation from Brussels, you know, the European Union, or wherever, you know, I mean, or Spain for a conference and so on. And I'm seeing I have the chance, you know, I have the luck that I have this residence permit for Germany, so I don't need to apply for a visa. I'm following my friends. I see my friends. In many cases, you can't even say it because it takes such a long time to get a visa. I mean, they can't even say to the conference, I forget about it, because there's no time usually. And or the torture, that is really torture, the torture they're going through when they apply for visas, it's really, sometimes I'm ashamed, you know, I can't say I have a lifelong residence permit for Europe, because I think, like, you know, it's an advantage towards them, so sometimes I keep silent about it. Known by the public. And as we brought this article, as the issue came to that, there was a public uproar. Okay, oh God, you know, people said, we didn't even know that there's such an article. It's terrible. How can you force a woman to marry her rapist? You know, I mean, it's terrible. There was really a lot of public support for that and emotions on this. But Professor Soyaslan committee, but this guy, you know, this professor didn't accept it. It was the issue of the article which allowed for cancellation of penalty in case a rapist accepts to marry the girl he has raped. That is, somebody rapes a girl, but then he says, ah, okay, I accept to marry the girl. I'm like, as if giving her something. And then his sentence would be cancelled. So what happens in Turkey on the ground with this law is, of course, such a law, such an article is never applied to rich people, right? I mean, like well-educated or of higher. It's always applied to women or girls who have no money, no education, etc. Okay. So therefore, the article was actually not there. Professor Doğan Soyaslan saved our lives. He was a consultant. This is my idea, in my personal opinion, because I've been in the middle of the coordination. He was a consultant to the Ministry of Justice, Cemil Çiçek, and he was called the professor of professor. He was very famous and very respected. He was very much against our demands. By the way, he's very secular and so on. So, I mean, really, this issue is not at all an issue of religion or not, and etc. So he was very much against us and to all the demands. So one of the issues was, you know, which was accepted by the